Welcome to Forward Physio, the show that gives you high-quality information about injury and rehabilitation, performance, and health. My name is Noah Mandel, and I'm a resident physiotherapist from Toronto, Canada. I created this podcast to provide you with educational content, not medical advice. Please seek advice from a qualified healthcare professional if you are currently dealing with a health-related concern. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving a review. I would deeply appreciate it, and you would also be doing your part in helping the podcast grow so that we could provide this information to more and more people. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Thank you again for listening in. I appreciate everyone who is following along so far, and we have 3 more awesome podcasts to close off 2023. And today is a special one. This was the first ever in-person podcast that I have recorded, and I did it with my friend Dante Martella. Dante is a strength and conditioning coach with 10 years of experience, and he has worked with everyone from the weekend warrior to the professional athlete. I like his approach to strength and conditioning a lot because he really emphasizes communication in his practice, and that really shines through in today's podcast. I really love doing it in person. It felt like it was just a very real, natural conversation, and it was just a pleasure talking to Dante in the comfort of my own home. So I hope you enjoy it. Now, because it was in person, there were some audio challenges, and that is why there was a big delay with this podcast, because we originally recorded it a couple months ago. So I reached out to people on Fiverr to try and get the best possible sounding episode. So there might be some speed bumps and some hiccups here and there, but I think it, again, is a really good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. I can't say enough about Dante and how much I appreciate his wisdom and his character, and I think you guys are really, really going to enjoy listening to him. So, without further ado, I bring to you my conversation with Dante. First in-person podcast ever.
First one ever, yeah.
Yeah.
For me too, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. I feel like it would be good if we introduced ourselves respectively, just because this is going to go on your podcast and mine.
Yeah.
So your listeners probably don't know me. My listeners probably don't know you.
Agreed.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So my name is Dante Martella. I'm a strength and conditioning coach here in Toronto. I've been in the industry for about 11 years, and I know Noah through the great World Wide Web, which is chaotic, but given that it's provided this opportunity, it's also something I'm grateful for. We have some mutual friends in the industry as well.
Yeah, Rob. Shout out to Rob.
Yeah. Big shout out to Rob Banka, absolute legend.
Yeah. I am a resident physiotherapist, soon to be full-on registered. It's been an insane licensing process, but basically nothing will change when I'm not registered physio. So I've been practicing for about a year now. So haven't gotten my hands as dirty as you.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have...
It's probably a good thing. They're filthy.
I'm sure you have some good stories, but that's pretty much it. Just active on social media and very big on education and very big on promoting critical thinking and being a little bit skeptical of a lot of the nonsense that's out there and sort of helping people navigate, trying to do so in a positive way instead of just ripping on everyone.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I was first intrigued by when I came across your account, because I came across your account and, by extension, your personality, which shines through, before I knew that we had any mutual contacts. So I'd already been following you for a bit, probably a couple of months. And one of the things that stood out, I don't know when this period of skepticism started. It seems like maybe that's naive to say. Maybe it's newer to me, more novel to me. But it seems like it's been only the last couple of years. I don't know, 3-5 years, whatever it is. And maybe social media plays a part there, where it's a little more outspoken. People are more often skeptical. There's a lot more pages that kind of question a lot of things that otherwise were considered traditional for a long time.
Right.
But I think that, what you alluded to there is true to me in my experience with your page, was how well you were able to be skeptical without coming across as condescending or, for lack of a better term, being a dick.
It's hard sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you want
find yourself holding back.
I think so. Sometimes, yeah. But it's just, I think to be a dick, sometimes it's such like an initial type of reaction that you might have. And it just doesn't take too long to stand back and try and think rationally about it and be like, this probably isn't a good move. Not just online, where it's much easier to just say whatever you want because there's nobody in your face that's holding you in check. But, in real life as well. I mean, I feel like oftentimes we just have to like hold ourselves back a little bit for the greater good.
Yeah, for sure. For me, at least, it's like there should be a stark contrast between, sometimes the line gets blurred between like skepticism for the sake of, like, the intent matters, right? Skepticism for the intent of, or for the sake of learning, growth, dissemination of information versus skepticism for the sake of skepticism, which inevitably bleeds very quickly into like being contrarian just for the sake of being contrarian.
Right.
And I think like from my perspective, skepticism is like very much, it's much more about like passive kind of like patience, or an active patience rather, like actively sitting back to learn more and kind of questioning things for the sake of wondering what else might be true or what else might apply, versus like being a contrarian is like, no, you're wrong, and because you're wrong and because I know X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Which inevitably comes from like an egotistical kind of perspective or an insecurity of some kind.
Yeah, and also from the perspective of you think you know everything. Yeah. And the whole point of being skeptical and questioning things is because it comes from the understanding that there's a lot that we don't know.
Right.
And that's most of the stuff that I have an issue with. It's just people being so confident about whatever claim that they're making. It's like, how do you know that? I'm way more confused than that.
Do you find that any of that came, like, coming out of school, was that already your perspective, or was it something you adopted kind of?
Yeah, I adopted it in undergrad. So going into my master's of physio program, I was already going into it skeptical. So all of the stuff I was learning in physio school, I was
bullshit. No, I'm just kidding.
There's some stuff that I definitely disagree with that was in school. Overall, it was a good program.
Yeah.
It's a funny story of why I started becoming this way, but it's embarrassing. So I got really into nutrition in my undergrad, and I thought I was so smart. I thought I had all the answers and I knew everything. And because of that, I didn't question much, and I loved to learn. So I was just on YouTube all the time, just listening to so much pseudoscience nonsense about nutrition.
Right. Or arguably there's more in that world than any other, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, in nutrition?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
big
so.
Time.
Probably. Anyway, I was at the point where I was like putting butter in coffee. Like, it was stupid.
Yeah.
And I came across like Alan Aragon, who I spoke to on like the last podcast, and Layton Norden, who are like big evidence-based names in the world of nutrition. And they had this counter viewpoint, and at first it hurt because I was like, nah, it's probably not true. And then I had to unlearn everything once I accepted that maybe there's more than one way of looking at things.
Right.
And then from that point on, I decided that I didn't want to go down that road again.
Feeling like an idiot?
Exactly, yeah. So now I'm much less firm in a lot of the stuff that I believe, and more open-minded. And yeah, I think, again, that's where the questioning comes from. It's not just questioning for the sake of being a dick.
Yeah, it's an interesting paradox, because part of like maybe the most, I don't think there's any way to like say this definitively, but the most aggressive or efficient way to learn is to like make mistakes at full speed.
Yeah.
And to really fucking commit to like, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this podcast, but
it's too late.
All good. To really commit to like an intent, a path, some kind of pursuit.
Yeah.
Which, if you're going to do it fast and hard enough, it's going to be bumpy, right? So to lose that entirely, to lose that energy entirely is probably unwise. But who am I to suggest that I'm wise? Just as conversely, just as conversely, I think, being a little bit too lenient towards that, of like, that you get bullish, you get arrogant, you get overly confident, all that stuff. So, balancing those perspectives, I think is important.
Yeah. I feel like some people start off really strong with that, but then as they get more and more comfortable in their careers, they question less, because whatever they do works, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
I resonate with the nutrition piece though, because my story starts at least somewhat similar. As far as like my first foray into the industry was, I grew up in the restaurant industry. My parents owned and operated like an Italian restaurant in the city for 30 plus years. And myself and my 3 siblings lived above it. So literally it was like one staircase of 20 something steps. I'll remember it as an even number because I'm weird like that. I need things to be even and symmetrical. My siblings would suggest there were 23 or whatever it was, 22 in my mind. And so that was all that separated like our home life from the business life. A place where, you know, those lines blurred.
How good did it smell?
Oh, incredible. Stupid. Like, just crazy. My room in particular, at some point, you know, as we grew up, we all had our own individual rooms. And my room in particular was above what's known as the party room. It was like a dedicated space for like savages, basically. When Christmas came around and people were having work parties and like literally hanging from the chandeliers, the whole bit, people were going nuts. So it was like a door that we could close, so that it was not just like a dedicated space for those people to feel private, but for the rest of the, you know, patrons of the restaurant to not be bothered by this nonsense. But my room was right above that, fittingly. You know, I grew up playing the drums, so I'm like blasting on the drums upstairs. There's parties going on. It's all good. But the smells that came through, like my vent was like the vent of the fucking party room.
Yeah.
So like calamari and just like fresh bread coming through and pasta, everything and anything under the sun that was like,
oh man,
I would just go to my room just to be like, this is peace. You know? So I think that was like my, you know, I always had a passion for food. And maybe not so much from that time as it related to performance or nutrition or aesthetics or, you know, the physiology, but certainly from like a cultural appreciation standpoint. And then I think that changed when I started to discover like how quickly you can manipulate body composition with nutrition. And so as I grew up and maybe started becoming interested in like fitness to a certain degree, before I really wanted to, I mean, it was just going to the gym. It was before I really knew that I wanted to get involved in this. Nutrition was the thing that I really focused on. I thought I was going to go into school for that. And then, you know, long story short, I ended up just, I guess, falling in love more with the training side of things and kind of pursuing that. But nutrition has always been, you know, part of the background. And I think I went through much of the same of that kind of, you know, cognitive dissonance of just how is everything that I thought was an absolute truth, not even remotely correct.
Right.
You know, or at the very least, there's such a contrarian perspective or an opposing perspective that, you know, necessitates respect, for sure. So I respect that.
Did you ever go down the road of like carbs aren't good for you? Because I can't imagine how that would fare. In an Italian, growing up in the Italian household.
It was divisive, for sure. I was like an outcast. I was a black sheep for a while. My grandmother was like shocked, I think. I remember one time, even like cholesterol and eggs or whatever bullshit we were believing back in the day. I was like making an omelet and my grandma happened to be over at the time. She was probably in her like late 80s, 90s or so. Late 80s, early 90s. And I was making an omelet and I'm like cracking these eggs and like separating the yolks, which is not like uncommon in food, right? Like oftentimes recipes call for one or the other.
Yeah.
And then I just like, I put like one yolk back in and it was like 5 egg whites or something. And she was just like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm making an omelet. And she's like, what are you going to do with these? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like, throw them out. I didn't know anything. Throw them out. No, cholesterol's bad. And she's like, no, it's the whole egg. You need to eat the whole egg.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I can't disappoint this woman. So I put them back in, whatever. And so I think
arteries immediately clogged.
Yeah. And so I think even just simple things like that, like maybe you don't recognize them in the moment, but now looking back, and I don't even think I thought about that very often until right now. It's like these moments maybe subconsciously stack up and you start to realize like she's 90 something. She passed recently, but she lived to be over 100 years old, which is crazy. Like survived actual COVID in a home and like still lived another year and a half. And this is someone who had like a very long, healthy life full of love. Tradition was a big part of her life. Food was a big part of her life. And she never wavered on like wholesome ingredients, whole eggs. And, you know, we can go down that rabbit hole and what that means, but it was an interesting moment for sure.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many like longevity experts who say like this is the one way you have to live.
Oh yeah.
And then you look at the person who's like 98 and has been smoking a pack their whole life. It's like, I don't know. I think there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, and I mean maybe that speaks like the power of like the mind and emotions and psychology. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, which seems to be, I'm far from any fucking expert on anything, but like that seems to be a big part of at least a commonality of what all these people are talking about. It's like some form of enjoyment of the time that you have here rather than separating yolks and eggs.
That's the thing. You get so stressed out when you're that focused on your health sometimes. I'm so happy that I've sort of rerouted because I was so just like anal about all of this. Like I have to have like kale every single day. Like I can't have that food. I can't do that. Like I have to go to bed at this certain time and like I can't look at a phone for 4 hours. And it was just like all these rules. It ends up becoming stressful.
Yeah, it's dangerous when like it works, and it's dangerous when it doesn't work too. When it works, you become more susceptible to wanting to like continue down that path. But that, I guess, alludes to what we were talking about before. It's like maybe you make that mistake and that's how you correct it, or learn more about it, or learn about the timing and place of it. And at the end of the day, I think there's just, and looping back to skepticism, it's a respect for the reality, because it's a reality. It's unquestionably a reality, oddly enough, coming from a skeptic perspective. There are so many strategies that work.
Right.
So just respect that and understand like time and place and dosage, basically. So I think that's what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, agreed. Me too. So, I mean, you were talking about your upbringing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how this sort of all started, like going to the gym and eating. I've heard this story before, but it's a good one. Do you want to talk about just your intro to strength and conditioning?
Oh, is it a good story?
I think so. Like just like working out of basically like the gym with Matt Nichols.
Yeah. Cool. So I was fortunate to come across that opportunity at a young age. So at this point I was in college for like a diploma program for personal training, whatever it is. So you learn the basics of anatomy, physiology, that kind of stuff, which is super important, obviously. And at the time, I was like, myself and a friend of mine who's gone on to do some great things in the world of journalism, we were both sort of set down that path. A friend of mine, Scott, who's doing some great things with The Athletic right now, but has worked for every major publication under the sun. And we were both like obsessed with like sports, hockey specifically, and of course, growing up with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And so at that time, we'd like talk back and forth a little bit about starting a blog together. We did that. Eventually, we kind of met some people in that world. A gentleman by the name of Matteo Codispotti came across our blog and wanted to pick it up and make it something bigger. And he was a guy who he was a little bit older than us, and he had some great connections and was very personable and charismatic. And so Scott and I, being young and just like, we don't even know what we're doing, we're just like spitballing here on the internet. We were like, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. And he owned a cafe and had some different business ventures and was really interested in like kind of growing the blog. And one of the people that he reached out to was Matt. And Matt used to be the strength and conditioning coach for the Leafs for a long time. And I said like, oh, I'd love to meet the guy, maybe interview him, whatever it is. Shortly thereafter, we connected and there was an opportunity to work there, but it was like not necessarily as a coach or a trainer. It was kind of like, we'll see how you do type of thing. So I took the job because it was like a summer internship type thing. I had just finished my first semester at school. So I thought like, oh, I know anatomy, physiology, I get it, it's all good. And and then I walked into this gym and there's like college athletes, pro athletes, like just doing things I've never seen before. And I didn't even know where to start. Like even if I saw like, oh, that's a deadlift, I just immediately was like, I wouldn't even know where to start about correcting them or saying something to them. Good job, bad job. I knew nothing. Immediately, like, you just feel like you know nothing. Maybe that was a little bit of insecurity just about the kind of position that a lot of these people held. They're widely recognizable names, and I'm fucking nobody. I'm doing laundry in the back and making protein shakes for them and all this stuff. And
it's so crazy.
Yeah.
This is a good story.
There you go. I think eventually at some point was like called up to the weight room because the weight room was like, it's in the back of the arena at St. Mike's, or was at some point, and down in the dressing room was kind of downstairs off in the corner where I spent most of my summer. And at some point it was like getting the call up from the minors kind of thing. And it was like very parallel to a lot of the experiences that, not to suggest that what I was doing is anything remotely close to what it feels like to be called up to the NHL, but it was literally going from like a dressing room to like being called up to where the NHL guys are. And it was like in the middle of a huge workout that they had. They just got off the ice. Things were already set up. I didn't even know what the workout was. And boom, I'm in the room. And it was like, okay, you're like manning that squat rack. They're bench pressing. Like, look at the board. And all you have to do is change the weights and spot the bar. That's it. Like when the guy comes up, just fucking put the weights he needs on and spot the bar and shut up. I'm like, all right, got it. No problem. So I look at the board and it's the first time I've ever seen this. It was like the workout was written up and it was like the first warm-up set was like 50% body weight. And the second warm-up set was like 75% body weight. Then it was like 80% or 85% body weight, and then working sets at whatever it was. And so now I'm like, I need a fucking calculator. I don't know how much these guys weigh. Like, how am I supposed to? There's like 4 or 5 guys at each station. They all weigh different things. Yeah. Like, they're kind of roughly the same size, but I don't, like, in my mind, it was like, this has to be exact. Like, this is the NHL. So I'm asking the guys, like, before they go up, how much they weigh. They're looking at me like, they probably did this exact workout last week. Done it 100 times. They're just like, I don't know, dude, just fucking throw 45 on the bar and let's fucking get to work. Yeah. And so I'm like no, this it has to be exact. And there's like, at the gym, there were like small fractional plates too. And so I'm like, perfect. These exist for a reason. Yeah. These guys are very like finicky about their weight. This guy's 195 and a half. And the one guy was like, I don't know, like 12 this morning. And now I'm like doing math, like 75% of 212, fractional places. I butchered it, like completely butchered it. And then at some point, my rack was like backing up. Like there were guys that were supposed to be like, I was supposed to have benched like 5 minutes ago. And then someone at the back, I'm pretty sure it was Chris Stewart, if I remember correct, like leaned his head. He's like, holy shit, boys, do we need a calculator here? And then I just panicked, and my response from them was like 95, 135, 165, and then their working sets. And then it worked out, it was fine, right? Inevitably, that was basically what they needed to do. And so it was like terrifying experience at the beginning. And it's funny because like you try so hard to do it right, but when you stop trying to do it right, it ends up being the right answer.
How old are you?
Like, I don't know, 21, 22.
That's
like,
so stressful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. Like, the first real working experience, like, I'd worked with some of the college guys before that, but yeah, it was like, okay, this is what it's like. So I'm just going to be anxious every fucking day, every time I'm in here. That's cool. We get it done.
Yeah.
And, you know, that characterized a lot of my experience there for sure.
And it just happened, like, right down the road, too, right?
Yeah, there you go, right at St. Mike's.
Yeah. You said that you're just so obsessed with like this symmetry and this perfection. Like you have to get the calculator out, and you know how many steps were in your place growing up.
Yeah.
But when I look at your exercises, like the stuff that you post, I don't see that shine through as much. Now, granted, I'm not there.
Interesting.
But like, there's so many things that you do that are very like creative and just like, I forget what you call it, like the fuck arounds or something. Like,
Yeah,
like
when I get a case of the fuck around.
Right. Like, and like, so that exists.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a contrast there, or do you, when you do that stuff, are you still thinking about reps and like how symmetrical it needs to be?
I think I've really become fond of seeing, certainly through the lens of movement and training, and I would say it expands beyond that for me, but using kind of the yin and yang philosophy as like a general lens for how I just see life and discussion and debate and all this kind of stuff. Because it's like, it's never just one or the other, and they're not just complementary forces. There's like evidence of one within the other, right? So like in that yin and yang, there's like a dot of black within the white portion and vice versa. So to that, I would say like it goes back to my upbringing at the restaurant again. Like my dad was the front of house and this gregarious kind of charismatic personality. Everyone loved being around. He's the first person you see when you get into the restaurant, a very welcoming personality. And my mom was down in the kitchen as the chef. And so it's something you don't see, but it's very like, it's like organized chaos down there. And so I think maybe that kind of characterizes both the front of house and the kitchen a little bit, this concept of organized chaos.
Yeah, I mean, my family has all worked in like service too. I've worked in service. My mom owns and operates a restaurant, right? And that's a great way of putting it. Right? You go in the kitchen, and if you're just an observer, it's chaos.
Nuts.
But everything's
out. In order. Everyone's doing their thing, loud and crazy.
Right. At the front of house, everything looks so sort of collected and on point. But in all of the minds of everyone who works in front of house, they're all like,
what are they done? Are we to clear that table? Who's got the reservation book? Everything's going on back and forth. So I think it certainly shines through in the way I kind of see things today. And whether that's like, this is a byproduct of that, or maybe that was just related to it in some way, shape, or form. Even to their personalities as a team. My parents, like my dad is, as I said, was a charismatic character, and communication was a big part of what he did, which seems like it's something so creative and on the fly and kind of aloof. And there was definitely a science to it, whether it was conscious or not. Like I can remember at some point, there was a bar that kind of wrapped around the middle of the restaurant.
Okay.
And on one side was where he sat, often by the phone. And then just down to the left, there was like a staircase that went down to the kitchen, as well as the restrooms for the patrons. And so coming out from the party room at the back, you would have to pass through this passageway where on the left was the phone and my dad, and on the right was like the stairs down. And it was stairs you wouldn't see right away. It was kind of beyond a little bookshelf or a display case or whatever. So you'd really have to like break this barrier to be able to see the stairs and the telephone. And so my dad had this, I don't know, you can call it a move, whatever. I sort of picked up on it, where people would come in the corner and they would start like looking, they're obviously looking for the bathroom.
Right.
Whether it's just to go shit or a medical emergency, whatever it is, to be intrusive of that and suggest that like, I can tell that you're looking for the washroom is a bit presumptive. So he had this move when they would break the barrier, he would say, telephone? because it was either the phone or the bathroom.
Yeah.
Inevitably knowing that they're going to be like, oh, no, washroom.
Yeah.
But there was like this conscious element of like a dedicated approach to something that made someone feel welcome and good, rather than saying like, you look like you need the shit. Do you need the washroom?
Right. And I mean, after enough reps of doing that, when every single person they need the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, he could.
In theory.
Just say, yeah.
So on that side of it was my dad, and then my mom. You would think food is such a science, exact proportions of ingredients, and the recipes have to kind of tell a story, as it were. But that in and of itself is very creative, and she was an artist as well, like very gifted with visual arts, painting, drawing, these kinds of things. And that really shone through in her work too. It was very organized. Everyone was kind of doing their part in the kitchen. There was a science to it, but it was very kind of creative and expressive as well. So I think I just inevitably, call it nature or nurture, kind of apply that to my training. And so I compete in weightlifting and jiu-jitsu. I'm very green at the sport. I've never competed, but it's a goal of mine to compete in it. And I think even in those two sports, like weightlifting is exact. It's precise. It's timing. It's binary. Did you lift it or did you not? Did you PR or did you not? But there's such an interesting kind of creative approach that goes into the different styles of training for something like ditto for jiu-jitsu. So I think I've always liked maintaining a creative element. I work with a coach, a brilliant coach, Killian Hamilton, who I specifically sought out himself because of his like very no bullshit approach. He even has like a series of workouts that he's dubbed like the no bullshit series. And it's like very much Killian. If you know Killian, it's like it's him to a T. And I was like, I need more of that. Like I'm a bit too creative and like willing to try different things.
Right.
I need less of that right now if I really want to progress at weightlifting, and I need more of this kind of rigid approach. So it's been great working with him.
Cool. Do you feel like you have that approach not just with your own training, but with other people? Like if you had to be critical of your approach?
Yeah, I would say I probably I would describe myself more as like an intuitive coach, and like truthfully from a huge place of insecurity. Like a lot of times I've worked with some like world-class athletes in different sports. A couple weeks back somebody asked me like, what are my non-negotiables? And one of them was like relentlessly scrutinizing your process, because like I leave sessions with these people who can literally do their sport at the highest level with or without me, so my input is almost irrelevant. And I wonder, like, well, why is it that they come back? Like, what exactly am I teaching these people? What am I helping them with? What problem am I helping them solve? What am I supporting them with? And I think there's an element of, like this desire to maintain creativity and curiosity as part of the approach, without ever losing sight of like doing shit for the sake of doing more shit. There still has to be a goal. There still has to be a rigid structure to it. There still has to be objective measures of progress. But there are a lot of things that we do that are objective measures of progress that have a hugely subjective component. Did you squat more weight? Did you do another rep? Whatever it is, that's very objective. It's yes or no. But what did it look like? Did you do the same amount of reps at the same pounds, the same amount of weight, but did it look better? That's a very subjective quality to something that's very objective. And vice versa too. Like some of these more kind of explorative, creative movements, there is kind of precision to them as well.
I haven't told you this, but I take so much of the stuff that you post.
Really?
Apply it in physio.
Interesting.
Yeah, all the time. Like,
that's cool.
One of those, one example is, there's this exercise that I've seen you do. I think it's like most often is people's warm-ups. Where like oftentimes the hands will be on the wall and they're sort of doing like the single leg body twist.
Yeah.
And I think you introduced it as a concept to like sort of introduce like pronation and supination from the foot. Is that right?
Yeah, like a rotational, I just call it like a rotational ankle mobility drill.
So like I've used that for people's like feet, ankles, if they have pain there. But I'm like, wait, this is the whole body's moving here. I've also used it for people's hips, for people's knees as well, when they can't really tolerate like maybe like bending or twisting at the knee that well.
Yeah.
Like just using it as an intro to start doing that.
It's one of my favorites because traditionally, like, ankle mobility is taught in that sagittal plane where we're just trying to gain dorsiflexion.
Yeah.
But as you alluded to, there's a component that considers the entire chain of movement that I think we have to pay attention to, because I think David Gray said this the other day. He's like, I've never seen a bunion walk down the street alone. A bunion is attached to a foot, is attached to an ankle, is attached to a knee, is attached to a hip. And I think people get so locked in and like, okay, we have to fix the bunion or, insert whatever the goal is, gain dorsiflexion. So what do? We just smash dorsiflexion. And it's like, sure, maybe that works to a certain degree for some people sometimes, but that drill in and of itself, I think when it's taught well, when it's executed well, has a very like relaxed fluid component with a high degree of like sensory feedback, because they're feeling the foot on the ground going through these different ranges of motion, accompanied by kind of like the science of foot pressure and how that impacts the forces that we absorb and the intent of the exercise as a whole. So I think combining those two elements together, you get this like really cool, easy drill to teach. Sometimes it's challenging to execute, but I find people pick it up within a session.
But you also work with like really good athletes sometimes.
Yeah, and they're freaks for sure. But I've worked with everyone from like day ones in the gym to the elites of the elites.
Do you have a preference?
I do like both. I do enjoy both for different reasons. If I had to pick one, I like the challenge of like an imposing timeline that comes with the nature of working with athletes. There's a deadline. It's like they don't just have to do X well. They have to do that despite injury history X, Y, Z or ABC. And they have to do it in this timeline.
Right.
Go.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas, like, for the most part, someone tears their ACL as part of a member of the general population. It's like maybe they miss intramural soccer or whatever for a few weeks, whatever it is. But there's no, like, rigid timeline.
Yeah, I feel like when there is that timeline, it sort of makes you, I don't know if this is a mistake or not, I feel like it makes you pay way more attention to like training target, and like you have to make sure that, again, objectively they are achieving certain things because they have to in order to get to where they want to be at this certain time point. And when people don't have something that they really need to get back to, I find when I'm practicing sometimes that maybe I'm more relaxed in my approach, and all of these objective outcomes maybe aren't as important because I'll be doing with the person and they're not really engaging with these objective outcomes as much. Maybe they're more relaxed and they're just okay going with the process.
I think there's something there about like the energy you bring as a practitioner to it as well. In that, like, okay, so as much as like there's no timeline with a Gen Pop person, but they can afford to be relaxed during the movement, like maybe you as a practitioner need to adopt a bit more, okay, like let's make sure you're hitting your targets here. Let's make sure we're progressing well, that we're not so relaxed that we don't give a shit about it anymore.
Right.
And vice versa. The athlete always an absolute, more often than not, will show some kind of like apprehension around the process, even if they're extremely experienced and like this is just routine for them. They know there's a deadline and inevitably come across some kind of frustration or emotional attachment to that impending deadline from the athlete's perspective. And so maybe then as a coach, even though there's a very short timeline, you have to be a little bit more, it's okay, relax, we're going to get there, don't worry, this is the plan, stick to it. They both necessitate the same thing. They both necessitate a plan. They both necessitate talking to the person, picking up on cues, on verbals, non-verbals, these kinds of things, and then kind of deciding your energy and your choice of words from there.
That's a good point. It's definitely a good point. Yeah. Do you feel like you've always had that large of a focus on communication as a coach, or is that something that you've picked up over the years?
I would say subconsciously, yes, now that I look back on it more from a conscious perspective. And even prior to coaching, again, if I go back to my upbringing, I can remember like, not mocking people, but like I've always picked up on people's idiosyncrasies. Like the way, like if people have a...
Now I'm so sorry. Like, what have I been doing?
I'll give you the list afterwards. I'll send you an update. Actually, like truth be told, if you've taken things from my work, I have to be honest, I've taken a lot from your work as well. Just like the kindness that you bring to that kind of skeptical approach is brilliant. And you do this thing when you're emphasizing a point that you know the audience may have picked up on because of the sentence you said previous, that they could run away with that sentence, something like, I'm not saying never go and do chiropractics or whatever, I'm not saying whatever. You have like this little smile that you do,
right?
that is like, it's almost like you're answering something that no one said, because you know that you're answering a question that somebody has, right?
I do that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. Like, I think it's very authentic and it's genuine, and you can tell that it is, because you know that someone would be watching your video. You probably got comments like that or DMs or whatever, and whether you did that prior to or you would do that anyways, in addition to these DMs, it's like, you know someone's going to have a question about, like, oh, what are you saying? Like, I should never do dead bugs or chiropractics or needles or whatever the fuck it is, whatever the intervention is, and it's like, I'm not saying that, you know? So I think little idiosyncrasies like that I've for whatever reason, I've always picked up on and been able to kind of like replicate them fairly quickly. My wife calls it like downloading an accent. She says like whenever I speak to people that have an accent, like as soon as I stop speaking to them or they've like left the room, I speak like them to her.
Oh, wow.
or rehash something about the conversation. And so like for whatever reason, I'm able to do it pretty quickly. And I think there's a self-awareness there. There's like an empathy component there where you're like either trying to walk a mile in their shoes or put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
Or it's just like a fun thing. Like for whatever reason, it's just something I gravitate towards. So yeah, I would say like communication wise, it's certainly become a focus of mine in the last few years consciously. And it's something I hope to be able to distill into like an actual, like a reference package or a course or something that I can then help others utilize this information about communication, about verbals and nonverbals, about the psychology of communication, the effective communication on others, emotional responses, these kinds of things, and apply that to something that is decidedly like objective, like the training world, like strength and conditioning.
Yeah. So is that what the audience would be? Would it be trainers and coaches?
For sure. Yeah, I think ideally it would be coaches because I think there is such a focus on the opposite already. Which exercises do you do? Like how often do you do them? These kinds of things. Programming, anatomy, physiology, all of that is hugely important. Obviously, like that's the crux of it. It does nothing for me to walk in and be like, it's all about communication. Forget all the stuff about biceps, triceps. You don't need that. You need to talk to them. Like I'm not a therapist and I would never pretend to be. And I think there's like a need to kind of respect the limits of that.
Right.
Without making daring assumptions about its power.
Yeah, it's such an interesting area, and becoming more aware of the power of communication, I find that I also have to like sometimes pull myself back a little bit. Maybe it's not everything.
Yeah.
Maybe I still need to understand like something about injury.
And it does feel like social media is trending towards that now, maybe because the pendulum is swinging and people are starting to pick up on like, oh, wow, like you can, like back pain isn't just a mechanical issue. It's not just the biomechanics of the body, but maybe that becomes a little bit too much too quickly, or very quickly at least it can become that.
Yeah, that's a lot of people's criticism of the biopsychosocial model. It's that like, oh, pain's not all in your head. And then like people who are actually properly thinking about that model, they rightly say like, no, there's the bio there as well. Like we're not saying that's not important. And it definitely is. Do you feel like you ever want to dive into the world of pain and injury a bit? Because you see it all the time, right? You're working with people that are injured. And I'm asking because I think physios sort of want to dive into the world of strength and conditioning.
Interesting.
I feel like, I don't know, it's like, I forget who said it once. It was some sort of NBA player saying like a bunch of NBA players want to be rappers. A lot of rappers want to be NBA players.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a similar thing going on there. But yeah, what do you think?
That's fair. Yeah, I think so. I think there's maybe a response to this kind of like ever-present call to find your niche. And at some point, we run out of niches, right? Like there are specialists. You can only have so many of them. Eventually, you can have multiple of the same type of specialists. And so I think there's maybe the pendulum swings back from there to this more of a call to be a generalist, where there is value in respecting scope of practice always, but there's value in appreciating the wisdom or the experience that you gain from being able to expose yourself to a wide variety of different practices, right? And learning from people like you as a physiotherapist. Certainly there's lots of things I've taken from you about these concepts of pain. And I think the more it gets discussed and like becomes part of just the general rhetoric, you have to be curious about it. Like you can't be a strength and conditioning coach and not care about that at all. It doesn't work. Everyone experiences pain. Right?
Yeah.
Just like you can't just, I'm sure you can, but I would think it wise not to just care about that pain model from a physio perspective.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to get them on the floor and do stuff.
Right. And there's times when maybe that's way more important in physio. Like certain people, they don't have any athletic goals at all. And like maybe exercise will be helpful for them, but like maybe they just need like some graded activity with whatever activity they like to do. So like other people, let's say it's like they tore their ACL or something, or they got ACL surgery, like suddenly strength and conditioning principles become more relevant when there's like massive differences in the size of their quad compared to the other, and there's like huge discrepancies in their strength, and they can't absorb their body force or their body weight when they're like doing a plyometric or something like that. And it's like, hey, we need to work on it.
Oh yeah. It becomes very obvious what the first path is. But I think it's interesting because there seems to be in the rehab world, there seems to be two kind of emerging schools right now, where it's like you either rehab by simply using a graded exposure approach, where, okay, it hurts to bend your knees this much, we're just going to bend it a little less and slowly work towards bending it more and adding more load and then eventually challenging it with speed. And then there's like, I don't know if it's opposing, but there's at least another approach that really prioritizes biomechanics. And I think they don't need to be two different worlds. They can be.
Yeah.
I think we just have to appreciate, like, what are they both doing? Like, what are the commonalities here? Because someone who assesses asymmetries and then goes down the path of quote unquote addressing those, you don't really know if it's just because of the asymmetries that you addressed. You may have cleaned something up there.
Yeah, you have no idea.
You may have made it more balanced, but like, who knows? Maybe part of it is that they felt comfortable in this environment. Maybe you confirmed something that they felt they believed in themselves or whatever.
Maybe they were just doing exercise.
Right.
There's 100 other reasons why an exercise might help someone in pain other than the asymmetry.
Right, exactly. And then I think the graded exposure approach, like the recognition piece there is, well, by way of like exposing someone to these greater and greater ranges of motion, loads, and speeds, you're having an impact on their biomechanics. Right, like you're changing something, right, physiologically. And so, sure, it's easy to say, like, you had Aaron Kubal on your podcast. He's fucking brilliant, right? Like, I think he's done so much to really help kind of push this healthy skepticism agenda.
Yeah, he gets a lot of hate, but I think he's definitely a force for good.
Yeah.
Hate from, I think it's just because, again, he is a great skeptic, and I think sometimes it just comes off of, like, people think that he's just being rude to people, like contrarian for the sake of being contrarian.
Right.
But that's not the case with him. I don't think that's the case. I think he's really trying to help people,
for sure,
especially people who are in pain.
Yeah, I agree. I would go even further and say, like, if you look at a lot of the progressions that he posts about, those are very much the same that someone who focuses on biomechanics, like, would use a lot of those same progressions as well. I guess you could say, like, okay, well, who cares? Then everybody should just do the graded exposure approach. And, like, I don't know, maybe there's value in, like, really taking a deep dive into understanding the biomechanics of the body. Not that one doesn't by doing this.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Maybe sometimes the person who is, like, highly prone to going down this, oh, you have this asymmetry and that's bad because it's going to cause back pain or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you just need to chill out and just do some, like, basic exercise.
Right.
And probably, like, your ability to delineate which approach you need and when and how they fit together comes from experience, I think, right?
Yeah. It is an interesting debate because the people that use the graded exposure approach and they alter someone's biomechanics, like, I mean, do they need to really dive into that world if they don't understand it? I guess, like, they don't understand, like, the science behind it and all the terms and everything, but they are still implementing the same sorts of things that a biomechanics expert would implement.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's times when it is useful to know these things. And again, I think going back to times when you really need to increase people's strength, or you really want to make a case for that, which I know you know this, like, strength doesn't always mediate pain recovery.
Right.
But there's times when, like, you do want to build that up, and maybe at those times it's important to consider biomechanics. Like, hey, you're just loading your hip right now. Like, we need to load your knee a little bit more. Maybe that's more intuitive for people.
For sure. I think it probably depends also on the case and the actual injury itself, or the rehab itself. But I think too, this idea or this notion that, like, if it were simply as easy as, like, a graded exposure approach all the time for everything, I would think you wouldn't see people who have done that approach and it hasn't worked. Like, you would see, I come across all the time people who have done personal training, XYZ, physio, ABC, everything. They've done every modality possible. And it's never that I do anything like crazy complex. I take them through that same little warm-up, the rotational ankle mobility, whatever. And, like, there's so many reasons why this happens. Oftentimes, very quickly, there's an analgesic effect where you at least start to question, like, okay, we didn't just do graded exposure here. They've done graded exposure in the past, correlation, causation, whatever. This has happened many times, and at some point, anecdotal evidence is maybe the only evidence you need, but it at least makes you question it. Like, to me, it's not just one or the other. I think it's more respecting what are both things doing and the fact that you use both approaches either way.
So what do you think is very different about your, like, the warm-up and the stuff like that from that graded exposure approach? Because, I mean, you're jumping right into it.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference, obviously.
I would say I try and prioritize, like, the quality of the movement more so than, like, checking the box of, like, did they do the movement?
Yeah.
Did they get their whatever? Did they get their knee past their toe? It's less about that for me, and it's like, how did they get there? Which takes us back to, like, a highly subjective approach, which people don't like because you can't really distill that down to, like, follow this handbook and then you get answers. But, like, maybe that comes from an experience perspective. Maybe it comes from the biases, the places I've learned, the people that I've learned from. But I would say that inevitably is like a big part of it, because if we want to dive down like the pain science rabbit hole again, like there is such a hypervigilance that comes from having not had success with multiple approaches. You've spent time, you've spent money, you've had different diagnostics done, whether they're accurate or not. You've been told.
I'm just going to close the way.
Yeah, from like a little trash. You've been told that this is the answer and this is the way we're going to do it, and it didn't work. Even if maybe that person just didn't appropriately grade the exposure, right?
Yeah.
And then I think when they come to me, there's very often this like hypervigilance around it. And I think you can talk about it all you want, but inevitably the person has to feel something, right? So by taking them through very slow, controlled movements, which of course has a great exposure element to it, we get the nervous system to relax a bit, and inevitably that grants either more range of motion or the opportunity to develop some control. And I think that's maybe because the warm-up is so simple, or the exercises are so simple in nature, and people are looking for like, what, it has to be a complex answer. And I'm like, no, just like fucking move your leg like this. Like just move your leg like this a bunch of times, and like really slowly with good control and relax your breathing. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, that was like, this happened just the other day. I was consulting with someone. Like I got a text from a friend about their uncle. It's like, hey, my uncle like tore his hamstring playing hockey. And it's like, they were already telling me like the diagnostics of it. It's like, it's this hamstring muscle, that's the tendon that attaches to the ligament that attaches to the butt bone. I'm like, that doesn't even exist. There isn't one of them. And which is fine. You just say like, okay, cool. Let me take a look. So I end up seeing him, and like fit as a fiddle. This guy's like probably in his like late 50s, like crazy fit, not an ounce of fat on him. He's playing hockey and had like a knee brace. Yeah. And I guess like when he put the knee brace on, he felt something in his hamstring. And he's like telling me which hamstring it is, where it is. He's being very diagnostic about it. I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Like, don't worry. We don't really need to know about that. And he's like, no, we do. Like, we need to know, like, so that you know. Yes. I'm like, okay, but hang on a second. Like, you got referred, like from my head, I'm like, you got referred here. You should just listen to the respective practitioner's advice. Maybe it's something I have to work on. And I had to have this conversation with my wife after, and it was funny because in that moment I was telling her like I feel sometimes frustrated. I try not to let it show, but sometimes frustrated by not the skepticism that you get, but maybe this energy that you get that's like questioning your response. And so if I'm saying like, hey, look, we're just going to do this little foot rolling drill and we're just going to see how it feels. And then you tell me like, no, we don't have to do the foot rolling drill. It's like, it's the hamstring. And I'm like, trust me, give it a shot. And then later that day, there was something that like paralleled exactly that I was frustrated about from the exact opposite perspective, where I was like trying to solve this company that I was working with this company. I bought these mics from this company. Yeah. And there was a very simple diagnostic issue that nobody could tell me what it was. And I was getting frustrated because I'm like, just tell me why this thing stopped working. And they're like, sir, just take a picture and send it in. And I'm like, the picture's not going to show you anything. Yeah. And so it literally paralleled the conversation of this guy showing me the imaging that he had with his hamstring and like, you need to know the diagnostics. And I was like, nah, you're good. Just roll your feet out. Let's get it. And at the end of the session, he felt great. And then literally a few hours later, I'm like, these mics aren't working. What exactly is working? What is the picture going to do? So I think maybe sometimes just recognizing the different environments that these kind of thought processes manifest themselves in is valuable for sure.
I have another patient coming up this week. The subjective took a whole hour, which was like the full-time slot. We didn't get to do anything. And it was just like, he is someone who he has tried everything, every single thing. And there's so much hypervigilance going on. So I've been thinking about how I'm approaching the next session going into it. I'm like, what is the assessment going to look like? Because there are things that I think are relevant from like a biomechanics standpoint, from a like strength standpoint and stuff like that. Because he's coming off of a very old ACL tear, and it sounds like he didn't get great rehab ever. He's missing like lots of range of motion in his knee. So like that sort of stuff probably relevant. And if it isn't, from a pain standpoint, we can still go about chasing that stuff.
For sure.
Because the process of that could still potentially help.
Big time.
And I mean, like if it was my knee, I'd want it to move fully. I think that's a good idea.
That's probably a good start.
Right? I think so. I think it is.
I would choose that over the alternative.
Yeah, I think so as well. So, yeah, I think it's just interesting because this guy, he was like, I'm going to send you all my images. I want you to look at it with your team. Like, not just me. Like, he wants, like, the surgeons, push pounds to look at it and come up with, like, a whole approach. And I feel for the guy because he's been in just a tricky spot. He's, like, 4 different physios and everything. And
it's hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard because I was start with low-hanging fruit. Like, I don't know much about this person. I just met them, but I know that moves like shit. Yeah. Subjectively speaking.
Right.
That knee does not move.
Yes.
This will move very much. I don't care if they're like exactly symmetrical. We're not chasing symmetry for the sake of chasing symmetry. I think this knee would be better off if it moved better. Let's try that, right? Like, let's just try things that get it moving better, however you want to go about that. And of course, considering how that kind of interacts with the system as a whole. And then as you get to know them, then you can start to go down a little bit more of like the potential other contributing factors. All of that necessitates like a highly tuned ear to how people communicate with you.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to why I think that's so important. You need to be self-aware enough to not be so hyper fixated on the knee or on the personality. It's both. Like you have to do both.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest takeaways from that session. It's like, I'm very focused on this individual. And yes, like I am definitely thinking about the knee, but I think it's more than just the knee, where there's so much hypervigilance, and the result or the plan of action he really wants that really specific
That says
approach.
a lot.
Yeah,
that says a lot.
And I easily could have been like, you know what, like, I understand you really care about the imaging, but it might not be relevant at all. Because that could be true. It might not be at the same time it could be, but I didn't even want to throw that idea out here yet, because I just,
Easy
most
to beat
important
that with
thing,
resistance.
for sure. And I just want him to know that I'm on his team and that like I think I can help him.
That's a good point. And I think the fine line between like this over-promising and under-delivering type of thing where, yes, you want to make them know very quickly that like you're on their side, but without guaranteeing some kind of outcome. And I think a big way to do that is to just acknowledge what they're presenting you with. If they're presenting you with anxiety, don't fix that. Just acknowledge it, right? Like give some kind of respect to that, whether it's space or like verbal recognition, whatever it is. It's different in every case. If they're presenting very confidently, this goes back to the yin and yang thing. Like there's always two like diametrically opposed strategies you can take, much like, the rehab thing we were talking about. I don't know that one is better than the other. I think if someone presents very confidently, respect the fact that that might be coming from an insecurity. Respect the fact that that might be coming from an over sense of confidence. Maybe that's stemming from some other insecurity or whatever, right? You can go on and on and on, but I think it's important to at least consider these things.
For sure. I like podcasts a bit because I feel like in social media, you don't get the nuance. Like I'll say something about this imaging and then like in a 1 minute clip. And then I'm like, maybe it will inspire other physios to go about it. Like just telling every single patient like, hey, like imaging isn't everything.
I saw Noah's post.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just creates like, I hope this isn't the case, but it might create like this culture of just talking at people. So I appreciate this conversation about having conversations with people and like actually get, and this is what I was saying earlier, again, yin and yang, the overlap between physio and strength and conditioning. I think it's so cool because you are giving me this really good advice, and like this just, yes, I think we will work along like the same sort of spectrum from like pain to performance, and then you could argue that that's sort of one continuous thing, but it's two different professions and there's just so much overlap. I think this collaboration between physios and strength coaches needs to be more common. Do you feel like it is?
Yeah, I think even just from the perspective of like a fresh set of eyes, right? Like the humility, even if we agree on a lot, I think there's still that need to be able to respect the fact that like this person's process is not going to parallel yours exactly. Another practitioner that you respect, it's not going to be exact, and that's a good thing. Right?
Yes, it definitely is a good thing.
Yeah.
I feel like there's such a strong push towards the skepticism and this evidence-based mindset. And I spoke to Angus Bradley about this.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, he is. Like, he blew me away.
Yeah.
He was basically talking about how, like, you can't separate the art and the science a lot of the time. And I feel like there's people on both sides of the coin, at least in the physio world, probably in the strength world as well, where they're saying, like, you have to be evidence-based. And then there's people on the other side of the fence where they're like, no, like, it's all an art. I think it's like a little bit of both. You can't know everything. And because it seems like in the research, there's so many ways to go about treating low back pain, for example, that just because that exists, that I think creates the space for art to be way more appropriate. Yeah. As long as you're not doing some like really crazy shit and making some crazy claims about it.
That's the big piece. The last thing you said there is making claims about it. Like I said at the outset, like I consider myself a bit more of an intuitive coach in that like I've never consulted a piece of research and then decided I'm doing X based on exactly that or completely changing my opinion because of this research. Not to say that I don't pay attention to it at all, but prior to even like being exposed to this concept of like paying attention to the research, it was just intuitive. It's just like you do what you feel works. And as long as you're not saying, oh, it's exactly because of this reason. It's because we strengthened your hamstring 13% more. Or it's because we added 5 more pounds that you don't feel any pain. Like, I don't know, maybe they slept better, maybe whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think as it relates to Angus, he is a great way of kind of talking about it more from like the stimulus of training perspective, like diversifying the stimulus. People are always scared about the interference effect and things like that, where it's like, oh, you can't do cardio and strength at the same time because you're going to kill your gains or whatever the hell it is. Meanwhile, the reality is that like he has a great image where it's like the different ingredients in a stew being the stimuli that you think are happening, and then the fucking stew all together, just chaos. It's like, this is what's actually happening in the body. So you can't exactly delineate what effect you had. So I think, again, being respectful of all of the different potential things that could be contributing to that is important, for sure.
I think a big part of why I love the stuff that you post, because it would be an issue if like you were having like a guy do a forward roll and you're like, yeah, we're doing this because like the exact pressure at when he lands is helping to realign his vertebrae.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Like that would be insane.
And then you'd have me on your podcast for a different reason.
Exactly. I would like pretend to be friendly. You come to my home and then
take me on the back.
But yeah, I mean, it's like I get it. And you said like you do what you think works.
Right.
And without paying a ton of attention to a lot of the research, it still worked, right? You were doing like you were still getting results with people.
100%.
So
it goes back to that nutrition discussion that we started talking about. Like when you come out of school, whatever, early in your career, you have these lenses that are just based on the things you've learned from very few people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
An institution, a few teachers, a couple of classmates.
That's crazy. I've never even...
Yeah. It's like your entire worldview is shaped by like this many people. And you just learned this. You didn't even know half this stuff existed 4 years ago, and now you're an expert? Like, come on. And I think inevitably, like, the more people you meet that have been in the game a long time, a lot of them have this, like, very kind of, well, I don't know, wishy-washy. I'm not really sure if that's why it works. People get frustrated by that. But I think as long as you package it with some kind of confidence with a direction, you're good without these assumptions about, like, knowing exactly why it works.
For sure. You do jiu-jitsu, I do jiu-jitsu, and when I ask a black belt a question, I can recognize their expertise because they immediately say like, well, it's never like, which is awesome because just because they say, well, like it could be this, it could be that. I'm not suddenly thinking like, I know what you're talking about.
You don't know anything.
Yeah, like there's a very objective truth to how good they are and how much they know, and it's like how much they can beat you up at will.
Yes,
so you can't really deny that.
Strangle you. That is as objective as it gets, right? Like
truly.
I don't care how subjectively they went about it. You're out cold and they're not.
He can choke you up by accident. Yeah, I've seen that happen. It's crazy.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
I think there's something to that for sure. I guess that's just a respect for everyone's going to ride the Dunning-Kruger wave in some way, shape, or form. The speed with which you come out of it probably has a lot to do with self-awareness.
Or previous experience on the Dunning-Kruger wave, like I did.
Yeah, and that goes back to like recognizing, like, are you aware that like you went through this process in a different environment? Can you apply that to this same lens? So these concepts of like recognition, self-awareness tend to permeate a lot, they're as subjective as they are, tend to really permeate a lot of like objective endeavors like strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
Like you get people that are athletes that are incredibly frustrated by the position that they find themselves in, maybe because of some of the timelines we alluded to earlier. And it's like, hey, weren't you injured in like November during the season? Yeah. And then what? And like, yeah, but like my shoulder felt better, so I just played. And I'm like, okay, well, we're going to make your shoulder feel better, so you're going to play again. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. So sometimes it's that simple. It's not always that neat, but like this power of they themselves feeling a sense of confidence based on some prior evidence of success is a big part of how I go about things.
For sure. It's important for people to look back at their mistakes or their successes because I feel like it's easier to not fall for the Dunning-Kruger now that I've sort of been through it. And it's easy for your athletes to think about that they can get better when they have evidence of that as well.
A healthy dose of skepticism goes along. As long as that skepticism, going back to how we first started the conversation, isn't born out of the sake of it or a result of like wanting it to be so, then you're probably doing yourself a service by being able to openly question things and be aware that there are multiple avenues that can get you there.
For sure. Stay skeptical, folks.
Is that your sign off?
I guess so, yeah.
Stay skeptical.
Yeah, maybe I should I don't know, there's already a skeptical physio out there. He's actually really good at count.
Brilliant. Yeah, he's Diego. Great. Alexi, right?
Diego. Alexi's no bullshit.
No bullshit physio. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think I follow both of them. Yeah,
they're good.
All right, my man. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Good chat.
Yeah, man.
Solid.
Coming over.
Thank you once again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a review. If you would like to follow me on social media, you can follow me at noahmandel.physio on Instagram and TikTok. Have a wonderful day, and remember to keep moving forward.